You ever get that feeling there's more going on? Like hidden histories, secret projects just kind of humming away beneath the surface?
Oh, definitely. That sense that the official story isn't always the whole story.
Exactly, and that's what grabs me. Today, we're really diving deep into a bunch of documents a listener sent over. They're all focused on, well, the big one, Roswell, 1947.
Ah, Roswell.
Yeah.
The cornerstone for so much speculation.
Right. And our goal here is to unpack what these sources are suggesting, about the tech fallout, the societal shifts, potentially linked back to whatever happened there.
And what's interesting right off the bat is the mix of sources, isn't it? We've got personal accounts, seemingly first-hand stuff, but also interpretations of, like, official reports.
Yeah, it's like trying to build a picture from different angles, some maybe clearer than others.
A tricky puzzle, for sure. Especially with Roswell.
Okay, so let's set the scene quick. July 47, Roswell, New Mexico. Something crashes.
Big time. And the military response is immediate.
Like lightning fast. They lock down the site, silence witnesses, the whole 9 yards, and then poof, the official story.
The weather balloon came out pretty quick, didn't it? General Ramey tells Major Jesse Marcel it's a weather balloon, and that's the line.
End of story. Not quite, according to these documents. That speed, that simple explanation.
It just fuels the fire, doesn't it? It suggests, at least to some, a deliberate cover-up from day one, a long-term plan to manage the info.
And right in the thick of this alleged secrecy, these sources point to one Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso. Fascinating figure.
Yeah, his name comes up a lot in these discussions.
So fast forward to the 1960s. Corso's at the Pentagon, heading up the Foreign Technology Desk in Army R&D.
Not exactly a minor role.
No way. This guy had serious credentials. WWII, Korea National Security Council. He even worked for Senator Strom Thurmond later on. He knew his way around.
That background does lend a certain weight, you have to admit. He'd understand security, clearance levels, how things worked on the inside.
Absolutely. Now, let's be super clear about our mission today. We're not here to stamp true or false on Corso's claims.
Right, that's not the point of this deep dive.
We're exploring the information he says he saw, the connections he makes back to Roswell, and the ripples he describes, all based purely on what's in these documents our listeners shared.
Think of it as mapping out the narrative presented in the sources, understanding the story they tell and the potential impact they describe.
Exactly, without us adding our own judgment on whether it actually happened that way.
A crucial distinction. Okay, let's get into it.
Right, so the juicy part. Corso says he gets to the Pentagon, 1961, reports to General Trudeau.
A pretty significant figure in Army R&D himself.
And he's handed this file cabinet drawer, basically. What he calls the nut file.
The nut file? Sounds dramatic, like something out of a spy thriller.
Doesn't it? And apparently this file wasn't just paper. It had actual artifacts, physical objects, info, all supposedly from the Roswell crash.
14 years after the fact. Why then?
Good question. Maybe a change in strategy. Or maybe Trudeau trusted Corso? The documents don't spell that out explicitly, but the timing is curious.
It suggests the material wasn't just forgotten anyway. It was still active, still being considered.
So what was allegedly in this file? Get this. Thin, flexible wires, like glass almost, in a gray harness.
Okay.
And they conducted light. They thought it was wiring, but like totally alien, nothing like copper. He even said it seemed to bend light into colors sometimes.
Wow. It sounds a lot like very early fiber optics, doesn't it? Transmitting light down a flexible strand.
Decades before it became common tech. If Corso's account is accurate, that's huge.
A massive leap in thinking about how to move information.
Wait.
Light instead of electricity through glass. Remarkable, if true.
Then there was this fabric. Metallic, he said. Felt like silk, draped like cloth, but was incredibly strong, like metal strong.
Huh. Flexible and strong.
Yeah. He apparently wondered if it could be used for space travel, maybe protecting against cosmic rays or micrometeoroids.
That combination flexibility and strength is still something material scientists chase today. Think Kevlar, advanced composites.
Imagine having that kind of material back then. The applications, aerospace, body armor, endless.
Truly revolutionary, yeah.
And maybe the weirdest thing, a little stubby device, looked kind of like a flashlight.
Okay, what did it do?
It shot out an invisible beam. You could see a tiny red dot where it hit a wall, but no visible beam itself.
Invisible? So like infrared or something else?
Maybe. But here's the kicker. Pass something through that invisible path, and it starts smoking.
Whoa. Like cutting or heating it intensely?
Seems like it. Corso later apparently connected this to those weird cattle mutilation reports you hear about sometimes. He theorized it could be some kind of super precise surgical cutting tool.
That's quite a leap. But the core technology, an invisible focused energy beam, sounds like early laser concepts or directed energy.
Right. It's all pretty out there. Corso himself apparently admitted he was skeptical at first.
You would be, wouldn't you? Faced with stuff like that.
But he said as he studied it, he started seeing the potential. And he stresses the secrecy. Like suffocating secrecy. Nobody talking, everything compartmentalized.
Which, if you did have something truly paradigm shifting, especially something potentially extraterrestrial, extreme secrecy would be the expected response. National security nightmare otherwise.
Totally. Okay, so now we get to the part where these documents really start weaving things together. Corso starts drawing lines, direct lines, from these alleged Roswell bits and pieces to major tech booms that followed.
The reverse engineering angle.
Exactly. Let's start with night vision. He talks about finding eyepieces on one of the bottles recovered.
From the occupants of the craft.
Supposedly. And he identifies them as super advanced night vision, way beyond the kind of clunky stuff the Germans were working on in WWII.
Suggesting the beings had superior night ops capability.
Immensely superior, according to Corso. And he claims that insight, that understanding of how it worked, was directly fed into U.S. military development.
Basically giving U.S. forces a massive advantage in the dark, leveling the playing field, or maybe even tilting it.
Think about modern warfare. Night vision changed everything. Corso's narrative puts Roswell right at the start of that leap.
It's a bold claim, linking a specific artifact to such a transformative technology.
Next, fiber optics again. Remember those clear glass strands from the nut file?
Yeah, the light-conducting wires.
Corso connects them directly to how the EBE craft, extraterrestrial biological entity, that's the term used, might have communicated internally, transmitting light, sound, data, with almost zero signal loss.
Which is precisely what fiber optics do.
He even mentions getting a briefing from a Dr. Hans Kohler on this. So the implication is Roswell didn't just hint at it, it might have shown how to do it, accelerating the whole field.
Putting the pieces together from recovered tech, essentially. Again, a potential shortcut provided by the crash.
Then, super tenacity fibers. Back to the alien suit.
The strong but flexible fabric.
Right. Corso believed it offered protection against space radiation, and he links studying this material to later research efforts, like by Monsanto and the Army Medical Corps, trying to create artificial spider silk.
Ah, biomimicry. Trying to replicate the properties of natural materials like spider silk, known for its strength-to-weight ratio.
Exactly, for things like advanced body armor, ropes, composites. The idea being maybe studying the alien suit material jump-started or guided that kind of research.
Looking for materials with that unique combo of properties makes sense as a research direction.
This next one's more conceptual. Invisible artillery shells.
How does that connect?
Corso says the recovered craft lacked conventional metals, mostly composites. This apparently sparked the idea, what if we made artillery shells out of similar radar-invisible composite materials?
Wow, stealth technology, applying the principle to projectiles.
Pretty much. Imagine artillery your enemy's radar can't pick up. A huge tactical advantage. Precursor thinking to stealth aircraft and ships.
So the lack of metal in the crash was as informative as the tech present.
Interesting. And maybe the most unexpected link, MREs, meals ready to eat.
Okay, how does Roswell lead to military rations?
Well, Corso notes there was no sign of food prep or waste disposal on the craft, leading to speculation about how the EBEs sustain themselves. Were they biological in our sense? Different needs?
Right. Basic biological functions seemed absent.
And he connects this observation to the Army pushing hard on food irradiation research afterwards for long-term preservation. General Trudeau was apparently a big backer of this.
Which led to MREs, shelf-stable food for soldiers, astronauts.
Exactly. Needed for long deployments and, crucially, for potential long-duration space travel. So the alien biology, or lack thereof, spurred research into keeping our people fed far from home.
There's certainly a less obvious connection than fiber optics, but it fits the pattern of observation leading to innovation in his narratives.
Now we hit the really big ones. Integrated circuits, transistors, microprocessors, the digital age.
Okay, this is a major claim. Transistor development was already happening, right? Bell Labs, shockingly.
Corso acknowledges that. Bell Labs was definitely on that path. But he suggests the Roswell material gave it a massive kickstart. Maybe specific insights into miniaturization, solid-state physics?
How? Did he say what insights?
He mentions General Twining working closely with Bell Labs and Motorola right after the war in Roswell, implying a channel for information perhaps derived from analyzing debris. Maybe the structure of alien devices offered clues.
So, not necessarily inventing the transistor from scratch based on Roswell, but maybe accelerating it, providing solutions to problems they were already grappling with.
That seems to be the gist. Turning theory into practice much, much faster, moving from huge, clunky vacuum tubes in early computers like ENIA
To tiny, powerful transistors, and then microchips like the Intel 4004, which basically enabled personal computers.
Exactly. It's a provocative idea linking a supposed UFO crash to the foundation of modern computing.
Extremely provocative. It challenges the standard history technology quite significantly.
Then, lasers. Corso speculates the EBEs use lasers for, well, almost everything. Navigation, communications, surveillance, maybe even power.
The sheer precision and intensity of laser light would be useful for all that.
And he says this potential spurred a military push for laser weapons, tracking missiles, maybe even defending against other UFOs. Even though people were skeptical, lasers could be weaponized back then.
Another case of potentially seeing an advanced application and then trying to replicate the underlying tech.
And this next one is really out there. Brainwaves. Control systems.
Brain-computer interface stuff.
That's the idea. He describes finding a headband, apparently laden with sensors, with the graft.
Okay.
And the theory developed that this thing read brainwaves directly, translated thought into commands for the ship.
Whoa. Direct neural interface in the 1940s.
Mind-bending, right.
Yeah,
He even connects it to some earlier research done in Rome on brain frequencies and muscle response, and raises the specter of the Soviets maybe developing it too, or even communicating with the EBEs.
That adds a whole Cold War paranoia layer to it if they had this tech.
Exactly. The ultimate control system. Reimagining interaction with machines entirely.
That's bordering on science fiction, even today. A very advanced concept to attribute to that era.
Finally, technologically speaking, he touches on anti-missile tech.
Missile defense. A huge Cold War focus.
Right. He points out the existing Nike and Hawk missiles were basically useless against ICBMs. You needed something much faster, more maneuverable, and crucially able to survive the electromagnetic pulse, EMP, from a nuclear blast.
Hardened guidance systems, evasive capabilities, big challenges.
And Corso notes worries about Soviet progress, pushing the U.S. to develop its own advanced interceptors. Senator Thurman was apparently pushing hard for this.
So the perceived threat, both Soviet ICBMs and maybe the advanced maneuvering of UFOs, drove this R&D.
That seems to be the connection Corso draws, needing defenses against incredibly advanced, potentially non-human technology.
So you have all this potentially world-changing technology.
And according to Corso and these sources, it's all buried under intense secrecy, layers and layers of it.
Which leads to internal friction, right? You mentioned Thurman pushing, but others.
Yeah, the documents suggest Senator Thurman was frustrated with the slow pace of developing these defenses. But Secretary McNamara, Defense Secretary under Kennedy and Johnson, was apparently skeptical.
Skeptical of the need or the source of the tech claims?
Maybe both. Corso hints McNamara might have been getting bad info from the CIA, maybe even disinformation planted by the KGB. Classic Cold War intrigue.
Bureaucratic battles, misinformation, potential foreign interference makes managing something like this incredibly complex.
Corso even frames it dramatically. He says the real Cold War wasn't just U.S. versus Soviets. It was humanity versus ETs, hidden behind the scenes.
Wow. That's a profound reframing.
He uses metaphors like an invisible elephant in the room or a black hole where information just disappears.
Yeah.
Something massive, undeniable to those in the know, but officially invisible.
That captures the feeling of suppressed knowledge, doesn't it? Something too big or too strange to acknowledge openly.
The sources also mention the early official studies, Project Grudge, some CIA memos that actually did show concern about UFOs initially.
Before things shifted more towards debunking.
Exactly. Which led to Project Blue Book. Corso and others cited basically call Blue Book a PR exercise, designed to calm the public, explain away sightings, not genuinely investigate.
A common criticism from UFO proponents, that Blue Book's real purpose was containment.
And they even point to a defense official, Arthur Sylvester, basically saying the government could withhold UFO info even from Congress if needed. That shows the level of secrecy they were allegedly prepared to maintain.
protecting the secret above transparency, even democratic oversight.
This secrecy supposedly led to specific classified Air Force programs, USAF 7795, Project St. Blue Gemini.
Weren't those mostly anti-satellite programs, ASEs?
Officially, yes. But these sources suggest a dual purpose. Develop ways to potentially track or even engage hostile UFOs. Space defense in a broader sense.
Plausible deniability. Anti-satellite tech could have other applications.
And then you get Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, or Star Wars.
Right. Missile defense shield, lasers, beam weapons.
Futuristic stuff, which, viewed through this Roswell lens, might also have been partly aimed at providing a defense against potential off-world threats, not just Soviet missiles.
The technologies certainly overlap, tracking fast objects, directed energy weapons.
The sources even talk about a super-secret working group, like Majestic 12 or something similar, managing the whole UFO problem.
The ultimate gatekeepers.
And they hint at this initial period where the U.S. felt totally defenseless, leading to a kind of negotiated, well, surrender is the word used, basically agreeing not to interfere because we couldn't fight back.
That's a startling claim. A secret truce.
Until, supposedly, something changed. They mention an alleged shoot-down incident over Ramstein Air Base in Germany in 1974, suggesting maybe capabilities improved or the dynamic shifted.
That adds another layer of intrigue and conflict to the narrative.
And just to show that long-term, deep government secrecy is possible, they bring up Operation Shamrock.
Ah, the NSA surveillance program, monitoring telegraph traffic.
Yeah, ran for decades in total secrecy. Proof, they argue, that the government can keep enormous secrets for a very long time, a precedent for something like a UFO cover-up.
It demonstrates the capability for long-term compartmentalization and secrecy, certainly.
But wait, there's more. The rabbit hole goes deeper. The documents then shift to Project Horizon.
Project Horizon rings a bell. Wasn't that an army plan for a moon base?
Bingo. General Trudeau's brainchild, apparently. An incredibly ambitious plan back in the late 50s, early 60s for a U.S. Army lunar outpost by the mid-1960s.
Seriously, mid-60s, before Apollo even landed.
That was the plan, way ahead of NASA's public timeline. And it wasn't just about flags and footprints. There were big strategic, military, scientific reasons to get there first and stay.
Control the high ground, lunar resources, scientific observation post. The Cold War context made the moon incredibly strategic real estate.
Totally. And the proposed design was fascinating, like nuts and bolts fascinating. Using modified missile tanks, basically cylindrical metal sections assembled on the moon.
Modular construction. Makes sense.
Powered by nuclear reactors, with special pressurized rovers for getting around.
Nuclear power would be almost essential for a permanent base.
And they worried about the harsh environment. The documents stress the need for substantial outer metal surface suits, not just fabric like early Apollo concepts, real protection needed.
Yeah, radiation, micrometeoroids. The lunar surface is brutal. Heavy-duty suits would be a must for extended stays.
Logistically, it was insane for the time. Required huge rockets, proposed Saturn Ts, and refueling spacecraft in Earth orbit just to get everything to the moon.
A massive undertaking. The launch requirements alone would be enormous.
And how would they manage it? They envisioned a special project structure, like the Manhattan Project that built the atomic bomb. Top secret, massive authority under a unified space command.
Maximum priority, maximum secrecy. Makes sense if the stakes were perceived as that high.
And the documents convey this sense of extreme urgency, like we had to do this, be first, or the consequences could be dire, especially if the Soviets got there. Or maybe if someone else was already interested in the moon.
That adds another potential layer to the motivation behind Horizon, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Beyond just beating the Soviets.
It really does. So let's try and wrap this up. What these documents our listener sent paint is this. Well, this extraordinary picture. Roswell happens, maybe provides technological seeds.
Which are then cultivated in deep secrecy, potentially accelerating everything from fiber optics and computers to stealth, and maybe even influencing space goals like Project Horizon.
Yeah, the aha moments reading through this stuff are those connections, right? Seeing how seemingly random tech advances could be linked back, according to this narrative.
And understanding the why behind the alleged secrecy, the Cold War fear. The sheer weirdness of it all, the potential power involved, and the sheer ambition of things like Horizon seems almost logical if you accept the premise of a hidden reality involving ETs and their tech.
And for you listening, we hope this deep dive gave you a good, concentrated look at this whole complex story, pulling out the key threads from these sources.
We tried to keep the tech talk clear, avoid getting bogged down in jargon, whether you're an engineer or just curious.
So the final thought we want to leave you with is this. If a secret like this could be kept, even partly true, for so long, what does that imply?
How might it still be shaping things? Our tech, our view of space, government secrecy, what other massive, invisible elephants might be out there in our history, quietly influencing the world we think we know?
Definitely something to chew on. It really encourages you to keep questioning, researching, and thinking critically about these big, complex topics.